perspective and led him to autonomous vehicles. Two different personal tragedies, which involved fatal motor vehicle crashes, inspired Kevin to leave his career in corporate finance and become an advocate for safer and more equitable transportation. Kevin felt that there was a lack of public education and collaboration in the autonomous vehicles industry. So what does an AU grad do? Kevin co-founded the DC Autonomous Vehicles Association. Today it has grown to an over 400 member organization. In addition, Kevin is also a master's degree candidate at Georgetown University and does research with Bishop Consulting. Now, Kevin, I will turn it over to you to introduce the panel and the panelists.
Thank you so much, Salika. On behalf of the DCAVA, we would like to commend you and the School of Public Affairs here at American University for hosting this forum. We're proud to support your efforts towards creating an autonomous future that is safe, equitable, and efficient. If you're interested in learning more about the DCAVA, you can find us. We are at dc-ava.com and on Twitter at DC Autonomous. So we have a great panel ready to go here. So I think we can get into our discussion. Now ask the panelists to introduce themselves, starting with David Catania.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's my pleasure to join you today. My name is David Catania, and I am the head of global public affairs for Starship Technologies. I presume once the other introductions are done, we'll circle back and begin our presentations. But looking forward to this. Thank you very much.
David Rodriguez from KiwiBot.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is David. I'm the head of business for KiwiBot.
Greg Rogers from Neuro.
Hey everyone, Greg Rogers. I am a public policy manager at Neuro, but I'd also like to thank Salika and American University for hosting this important discussion. And for Kevin, your passion and your constant work on this issue is inspiring with DCAVA. I'm really happy to be on this panel with you guys.
All right, thank you very much. So we can frame this conversation. I think it'd be great if you could tell us about what your companies or show us what your companies are doing on autonomous delivery.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a very quick video and then followed by a few slides. And so Lisa, if you wouldn't mind playing the Starship video, please. I don't believe the video is on. I'm sorry, the audio rather, I'm sorry.
The delivery robots are amazing.
I must have used the service 50, 60 times.
When I haven't got time to go out, if I'm working from home, it's great to have lunch.
I can order what I want, what I need, and actually just sit back and track the robot to my front door.
They can bring the delivery in a very short time.
Quite often I end up working from home. Sometimes you don't have the time to go out and get a pint of milk so that you can actually have a cup of tea while you're on your calls. I find Starship really great to be able to just fit in with my lifestyle. It means I can really focus in on doing my work.
My wife amazingly has donated a kidney so that I can receive a kidney. With both of us out of action and unable to drive, it's been brilliant just being able to pop onto the app, order the things you need without having to trouble anybody else, without having to walk to the shop.
We trust that they always get here because there's never been a problem. Every time we've ordered something, it's always arrived promptly.
I had guests coming over from Birmingham. When I was putting everything together, I realized I'd forgotten the yogurt. Robots to the rescue, and the robots were here before the guests came.
If I do a big shop, half my food just goes to waste. So I just buy small amounts, and actually this allows me to do it.
Less cars, less pollution, it's green and it's good for the environment.
We are very proud of these robots. We've got videos and we show them around to people.
Thank you, Mr. Robot.
I don't have to take time off work. I don't have to go to the shops.
Just knowing that whatever you need is just a few clicks away on an app and it arrives outside your house. So why would anybody not use it?
It's turned into where it's become a necessity and essential service for people, where it's now famous.
Thank you for that. I'm going to share a very quick slide presentation. If you'll bear with me. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is David Catania. I'm the Managing Director of Georgetown Public Affairs, but I also serve as the Head of Global Public Affairs for Starship. You just saw a video from one of our 20 operating centers in Milton Keynes. We serve about 50,000 people in that community. In that community over the last year and a half, we've traveled about 450,000 miles. We have calculated about a 330,000 mile reduction in VMT and 130 metric tons of CO2 emissions. And along with it, in just that community, hundreds of thousands of commercial deliveries. And so we're very excited about our technology. And again, that's one of our 20 sites. It's one of them in the UK. The technology works very simple. It's much like an Uber or an app or a Lyft or any other kind of online purchasing you would enter into. You go to our app, you shop for the merchant in our service area that you wish to purchase items from. You purchase your items, watch the item come to watch the device come to your front door. When it arrives, of course, it's locked. You will receive what you'll see there, a push button to unlock it. You simply do that. Open the door and you retrieve your items, and then the device goes back to where it came from. The device itself has 3 layers of obstacle avoidance technology. It has a suite of sonic sensors for sound. It has computer imaging for being able to identify everything from a person to an individual in a wheelchair to a car, etc. And then we have a time of flight capabilities and radar. We're able to identify objects in excess of 300 feet away from the device at all times. So we know what direction an object is coming, what speed, and what the likelihood is of a collision, and we're able to avoid them as a result. This just gives you a quick insight into what the computer imaging looks like. You can see that in all instances, we obfuscate images of people to protect their privacy. This will give you a bit of a sense of what the robot is seeing in real time. Just in the interest of time, these are the locations where we are currently operating in the US. We have a pretty robust, and I think maybe there'll be questions about this. We have a pretty robust public affairs section. We actually have been on the forefront of drafting the state laws that have become the template for the country. Starship has personally been engaged in 10 states in passing laws that have defined the device as a separate vehicle under these state codes and provided lookalike regulatory frameworks for their operations. And so these are the states in which we are currently operating. In some states, for instance, in California, we have 3 locations, Arizona 2, Texas 2, Virginia 3, but it gives you a sense of where we're operating. These are our international operations. Our largest operation in the UK, you just saw in Milton Keynes, we'll be opening a second one in the coming weeks in a community called Northampton. We have authorizing abilities in the countries that you see. We have operations in Estonia, in Germany, where we operate in Hamburg and a number of industrial uses, and then in Denmark, the same. So unlike maybe some other delivery companies, we actually engage in food delivery, grocery delivery, and package delivery. We create essentially hubs for packages to be delivered, which allows people to, through a subscription service, obtain the package at the time and place that they want. And it also facilitates returns. And so we think this is an important next step in sustainability of e-commerce. Just like you'll find with the other companies, and we're really pleased to be joined by Kiwi and by Neuro. We've had incredible social acceptance, as I know they have with their technology, in part because of the neighborhood relationships and the community relationships we build and the partnerships we make, not only with local governments, but also with accessibility communities, privacy communities, pedestrian, cyclists, and others. A few years ago, I've been with Starship for about 5 years. I knew we had kind of arrived when young people started dressing up like our robot for Halloween. And just similar, I know that Kiwi has these stories and Neuro has these stories too. This is really a point of great fascination and interest among young people. And so in each of our operating centers, we have walls that are dedicated to the cards and thank you notes and good wishes that children will put in the devices to send back to us. In a nutshell, that's Starship. We've had 15 million human interactions. As I mentioned, we have about 20 plus operating centers around the world, hundreds of thousands of commercial deliveries, and are very excited about the future, very excited to be here with our colleagues from KiwiBot and from Neuro. Thank you.
All right, I think we'll go to David Rodriguez at KiwiBot now.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. Instead of jumping directly with a video, I would like to rather tell a story. And it's more like the story of our company. So in a few words, we started this project because we think that delivery as we know it is broken. We don't think that it's fair that you're paying up to 40% of the cost of food or goods on top of the restaurant list price. We don't think that it's fair that merchants have to pay up to 40%. And we know that delivery partners face increased barriers on doing their jobs appropriately. It's getting harder. So over the last 3 years, we've been building the full stack to solve delivery and accelerate humanity, which is our ultimate goal. At this point, we have done over 100,000 deliveries. We were the first company to roll in college campuses, and these really have a lot on our end in having a good experience with our communities. We're focused in the US. So as a group of friends, we're Colombian. We started our own company in Bogota, Colombia. We sold this delivery company we had for a bigger player locally. We were very lucky to go to the local Shark Tank. We got some dollars. We came to the US. We were welcomed at UC Berkeley Acceleration Program. You can actually see the first robot we built, definitely a basket with wheels and a cell phone as a camera. This opportunity had us creating the robot that will properly merge with communities. So we have created 5 iterations of a robot and over 275 units that showcase how behavioral economic modes can be very important towards getting a robot that is accepted in a community using nudges, which is the underlying framework. We move on to create our own full stack of software and hardware, real-time obstacle avoidance, waypoint and parallel autonomy. We even have this idea of first mile delivery and last mile delivery to automate the entire structure, and following Steve Jobs on the ideas that if you take your software properly, you build your own hardware. So we are in this process of building our own boards, and definitely we want to build this perfect marriage between our software and hardware. The next step is that we believe in the idea of the Internet of Atoms, the idea that you should be able to get anything delivered that is 1 mile around you virtually for free. We're very focused on cost efficiency, and our unit economics nearing positive numbers, given our stack are, I think, impressive. We build the possibility to interconnect any business. They have or not delivery experience, they have or not a POS, we will install one or create the right API. And we have over 11 case studies with multiple type of companies. So it was great to have created these API and platforms infrastructure that led us to prove a product market fit in the university at UC Berkeley. It was great to have all the feedback from the community and actually learn both how to operate on the public right of way and also inside a campus space. So definitely product market fit is something important, having students dressing up as KiwiBots, communities so happy about the technology that they will put the robot as a symbol of their own in games. Definitely something that says a lot. Entire classes dressing up as KiwiBots, kids, adults. It's definitely something that was proven. After this process, we sell the US on the idea on how can we safely launch, how can we participate with local governments and build those modes that will create new channels to create accessibility. Again, based on our lean execution and technology. So in essence, we learned how to do this. We work with anthropologists and with social scientists because we believe that this technology is a social process that is driven by technology. So when we go to a new area, we will make sure that the community wants us. We need to be accepted before we push a service. We will analyze sidebar infrastructure. We will analyze supply, demand, create the right clusters, use Vision Zero frameworks to outline the right crosses, make hundreds of simulated orders. with in-field supervisors and not also working with the right platforms, making the right PR moves, and actually engaging communities around the service that is accessible and open to all. So after we were capable of learning how to launch, something we did at the University of Denver, we established key business-to-business partnerships. We believe in empowering the small and medium businesses, even if they don't have an online experience, how these sales tax dollars are actually very meaningful for entire communities and families. We have a very robust B2B funnel, which will be announced by the end of this year with the biggest delivery companies in the world. So we've been very excited to also integrate students and local communities everywhere we go. We established our technical headquarters in Colombia, which is our original spot. This is great because it helps us keep our economics in what is like prospected positive by the end of the year. This flexibility of having an already operating service that has the possibility to stand on its own is very important on the vision we have for the business model. So in a few words, we're thinking about a robotic grid that is accessible for every community, that is not just tailored for certain communities, but rather something that the working class and the Latin community from which I belong will greatly benefit in cities like San Jose. So we learned how to cooperate with cities. KiwiBot is actually the first company to integrate a city through the MDS framework, through integrations with the city. We're integrated first with the city of San Jose. We believe that as we grow as a company, we can provide public policy data about sidewalk infrastructure. We're creating the world's best pedestrian in hopes of building a service that will increase accessibility, that will inform governments on sidewalk infrastructure and how can we actually build better services for our communities. We are actually expanding what MDS can do in micromobility, not only by creating reports, but when data starts to have density, then the geolocation and geofencing allows for the same government to know these streets have problems and these have higher volume of crossings. So for instance, just this can make for a better decision in terms of policy. So definitely one of the key messages is for us working with governments in partnership with these communities is key. Again, this is a social process driven by technology and creating open like systems for data, complying with GDPR and making sure the safety of the service is paramount for creating trust, which is the ultimate product that people expect every time they want to have something delivered for one on our multiple customers. We're very proud and excited about two verticals we are creating. The first one is a philanthropic equity launch framework, where we receive an equity grant so that we kickstart KiwiBot with our own safe deployment framework for this community at risk that we define. They work as the launch group after we have reached positive growth metrics in terms of growth hacking. Then we open the service and out-of-house marketing verticals for the rest of the community, and the income from the broader community makes the service self-sustainable for the long run. We think that KiwiBot is not something like an Uber Eats. We believe it's an open network for atoms to be transported in a community. We call this the Internet of Atoms. Finally, we are super excited to have this project where we want to tackle issues as SDG number 2. We have partnered with different cloud kitchens, and we allow them to produce more with a futures contract that we sign with them so that we can bring cost of food to marginal costs. And with this idea, we have the vision that the next product that will make Silicon Valley great is not necessarily a $1,000 iPhone, but a $5 meal with delivery. We believe that this is the vision of democracy that only a system like KiwiBot can create, be a readily available tool to solve a societal need. And actually, all this effort that we put into building technology, that it has a representation in the communities that are underrepresented on the innovation cycles. So very excited to be creating this vision for the Internet of Atoms, and definitely thank you very much for your time. I'm very excited to get your questions.
Thank you, David. And now to Greg at Neuro.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And it was great to see some pictures of my alma mater, David Rodriguez, Berkeley. Great to see that you spun out. Go Bears. So Neuro, what is Neuro? So we are an American robotics company. We're focused on building custom-built, zero-occupant autonomous vehicles to transform local commerce. And our on-road autonomous vehicles are operating on the roads today. We're in Houston, Texas. We're in California, and we're in Arizona. And we see a massive need and opportunity for autonomous delivery using on-road autonomous vehicles. And the pandemic has really accelerated that demand for contactless delivery in particular. So I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more. Delivery is no longer a nice to have, but a need during the pandemic. And I think what's important to remember too, in the transportation sector and in the environmental sector, we talk a lot about the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions through changing how people commute and changing those sorts of travel patterns. But 43% of personal vehicle trips in the US are for shopping and for errands. And so we want to make it easier and cheaper for people to replace those trips in personal vehicles so they can spend more time doing what they love to do. And a real key here is that we believe people should have access to groceries, medicine, and other essentials, regardless of whether they can afford a car and regardless of whether they're able to drive a car. Car ownership shouldn't be a meal ticket, and that shouldn't be the determinant of whether you can access medicine or not. So that's why we're building a local autonomous delivery service, helping address those needs to access groceries, food, parcels, convenience, prescriptions, things like that. And so we partner with world-class companies like Walmart, CVS, Kroger, Domino's to conduct those deliveries, to connect people with things they need. Today, if you're living in Houston, in any of the 6 zip codes where we're operating, if you order from Kroger.com or from CVS for groceries or medicine, you get the option of choosing whether to have your delivery through Neuro. And I'm about to show you a video that gives you an idea of what our vehicles look like and how that sort of operates. So 1 second here, we're going to see, we're going to test my technological abilities. All right, let's roll the clip. music's so inspiring. I actually listen to it every morning while I'm getting ready. But what you'll see is that we've designed occupantless vehicles that are about half the width of a traditional vehicle you see on the roads today, with the purpose of being able to serve people quickly at up to 25 miles per hour with this current vehicle, and also rethink what it means to be transporting goods with an on-road vehicle. And our focus is really on how can we make those deliveries happen with a vehicle that is efficient in terms of space, in terms of energy, and it's safer for all road users. And happy to dive into that later, but I'll turn it back to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Greg. So wow, this is some like really exciting products and technologies. You alluded to this, Greg, actually, but given the nature of COVID social distancing guidelines, it would seem that AV delivery is just right for the times. Are there any regulatory obstacles you face at the federal or local level?
Yeah, AV delivery is absolutely right for the times. You hit the nail on the head. And in fact, we saw demand triple between March and early May in serving the Houston market. And I see my co-panelists also nodding their heads. There was definitely an uptick in interest. But so yeah, on that end, we're delivering prescriptions, we're delivering groceries today. And there aren't regulatory hurdles preventing us from continuing to grow at a citywide scale. But there are things where we're working on working with federal, state, and local policymakers on updating standards that are 50 years old that were originally written with human drivers in mind. These are things like requiring steering wheels and brake pedals and other human controls in every vehicle. So yes, we do see a need for modernizing AV regulations to make roads safer. And COVID-19 has really accelerated, I think, or rather directed a lot of attention to the importance of this. And as we look forward, I think there are a lot of opportunities to continue thinking about what we can do to revise standards that have been in place for a long time. And think about how can we rewrite safety standards to prioritize people outside of the vehicle, right? For a long time, we've been focused on that. And so, yes, we're really excited about that. And we want to continue to develop these policies with policymakers in order to allow us to continue to expand and to put forward new and novel vehicle designs.
Kevin, if I just chime in on our behalf, Greg's device is, their vehicle is fantastic. And the difference between Greg's device and perhaps mine and David's, our companies, is that their device between 20 and 25 pounds is going to fall under the federal definition of a slow speed vehicle. And there are certain construction use requirements that are waived, and they have different regulatory hurdles than we have. Anything that travels less than 20 miles an hour, is really subject to state law, regulation, construction use requirements such as they exist on the state level. Our challenge has been, to create, sometimes there are non-construction use issues that will impact us. States will want to look at us like we are a vehicle, and we are constantly pushing back that we are not a typical motor vehicle. Things like registration and licensure, those things and insurance requirements that apply to 10,000-pound vehicles that go 200 miles an hour doesn't make sense to apply to us. And that's why we've really led the way in creating 10 state laws in the US on this effort. We also are very active internationally. Just for individuals who might be practicing internationally, we're very involved in the future mobility discussions in the UK on changing their perception and their definition of these slow speed mobility devices. And we have been very active for the last year and a half in Denmark in a change of law there that will take effect on the 3rd of December. But most importantly, it's working with your government partners to create a framework that is a lookalike, that it makes sense for the type of vehicle that you are, or type of device you're putting in public space. Our devices weigh 65 pounds, the top speed is 4 miles an hour. It requires a different regulatory touch than an 8,000-pound vehicle that might travel 200 miles an hour.
Yeah, and also if it's possible to add something, there is also the important element of considering that not two cities are the same. So we know, for instance, on NACTO's regulations on the blueprint for autonomous vehicles, that there is this idea that sidewalks are not for delivery robots. What we have found in our investigation is that the analysis of the sidewalk grid, supply and demand, clusterification, accessibility, analysis of routes, we calculate the sidewalk width, the slopes, the colors, everything that is important to have safe operations. That the process that of course starts with people receiving the service needs to be done, that there is not a recipe that fills every city. And so the importance of the communication between the local, state, and the company is fundamental to ensure safety. It is a process that has to be run with every different city, but definitely that's kind of the key for ensuring safety. It's not something that you can say about every city, so that's also true.
I just want to jump in. If safety is paramount, and we hear about autonomous vehicles and how they operate on roadways and safety being the primary concern, your devices primarily are running on sidewalks. So from a safety perspective, what's different about a sidewalk, and what are the sidewalk safety concerns? I know, Greg, yours is probably a little bit different, but certainly for the Davids, you're on the sidewalk primarily.
Well, I'll speak for Starship. Our devices are designed to mimic a pedestrian, size, speed, and so on, and right down to the width. They're 21 inches wide, which is about an approximate width of an adult male. We're very intentional in the design, speed, and weight component to, in the event that all of our obstacle avoidance technologies fail, what would an impact look like? And we've been very lucky. We've had a stellar record in safety, but the maximum impact of our device is about 36 joules of energy, which is about twice as much as you need to crack an egg. And so the worst case scenario is you get hit by a piece of luggage. Now, we've been very lucky that we've avoided that, and we haven't had that because of the bubbles of obstacle avoidance. We have 8 sonic sensors which bounce sound waves off of the environment up to 15 to 20 feet, so that if an object is in front of it, the device stops. If an object is alongside of it, the software slows it down. We have the computer imaging, and we also have the radar and the time of flight capability. So we're looking out for objects before objects see us, and we're extraordinarily focused on accessibility. And if you'll just permit me one further point, whether an individual has visual impairment or mobility impairment, an individual, for instance, in a wheelchair, our devices will identify that wheelchair in the distance, and will make calculations based on that, and will actually ping a human operator for special instructions to avoid the individual, and will alert the individual that we are coming and that we will be moving around them. We have to be respectful of humans in their role as pedestrians, but we do fashion ourselves and follow the rules of pedestrians.
Yeah, and I think I would like to compliment, of course, David mentioned something that is absolutely true. Our systems need to be ready to alert the supervisor if there is something in the way. We need to yield in case someone else is coming on the way. But I would like to add something else. For instance, on our protocol, and this is something that we're very open to share, we do at least 400 simulated deliveries with and without a human next to the robot in each mile we operate, just to ensure that we're ready for operation. Another element that is complementary to the one David Catania raised is the fact that having robots rolling around, it's also important for the supervisors behind the robot. We cannot forget or lower the element that there's always a human factor that is taking decisions constantly on the right of way. And education for the robot and technology and community outreach is one part of the story, but it's also about the human beings that are making decisions behind the screen. So by doing hundreds of simulated deliveries, not only we improve mapping, not only we identify hazards, we create public policy recommendations, but also we're training people to be familiar with a new environment. So I think this is just complementary to what David said that I believe is very accurate.
Got it. So as you work toward the policy changes and continue to work with in these efforts? Any businesses or advocacy willing to push some of these initiatives forward? Can you hear me now? I might have cut out.
You did, Kevin. Would you mind just repeating the first part of your question?
Okay, no problem. So as you work towards government and communities, have you found any allies who are happy and willing to push some of these initiatives forward?
Greg, would you like to? I'm happy to answer, but if you would like to jump in, or David.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. You know, I often draw a parallel that AVs are sort of the Rorschach test of policy. You know the ink blot test. When people look at autonomous vehicles, they see reflected in it. So their preconceived notions about how the transportation sector currently is, and some of the ills that they want to correct. Ultimately, you know, I think people understand and acknowledge the tremendous benefits of AVs for safety, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for improving mobility for people with disabilities, and for increasing food access for people who are living in food deserts and struggle to access fresh groceries. You know, AVs are also tremendously bipartisan on the Hill. In the previous Congress, the Self-Drive Act in the House passed out of subcommittee unanimously, passed out of committee unanimously, then passed out of the House by voice vote with not a single vote against it. And AV START in the Senate similarly passed the Senate Commerce Committee unanimously. There were some, you know, the Senate has some quirks in how it works, and there are some parliamentary hurdles to getting it passed due to those sort of nuances. But we really have seen just tremendous interest in autonomous vehicles in Congress. But you know, Neuro works closely with policymakers across federal, state, and local levels, and we found that there's always a lot of people who are excited about the opportunity to address some negative externalities of our transportation sector today and improve safety. You know, there's the Self-Driving Coalition for Safer Streets has been active. I'd also point to Mothers Against Drunk Driving has also been very active in advocating for autonomous vehicles. And you know, especially the community representing people with disabilities has been very interested in this sector. You know, United Spinal has been just immensely involved, as well as the National Federation of the Blind has been a key advocate for autonomous vehicles because, you know, obviously they see just tremendous benefits here for people with disabilities to get around. Because let's face it, most of our communities in the US were built for people who are able to drive. And if you can't, it's very difficult to get around. Even with paratransit services provided by the public sector, those trips are often require you to schedule them 24 hours in advance. They don't always show up on time. And it creates a lot of obstacles for people to get around. So that's one of the exciting things is using AVs to help connect people with each other and also the things that they need.
Yeah.
That's been our experience as well. Just to chime in, to double down on what Greg said, you get public officials who get very excited about something new. It is a very bipartisan issue. On the left, you have individuals excited about disability opportunities, climate change, environmental energy usage. You know, and this is oversimplification. Sometimes on the right, people excited about innovation, commerce, sustainability, e-commerce. You know, one thing I will say, if this is you know, a plug for the States, is how much easier it is to innovate in our country than it is in other countries, and how that actually lends itself to the rapid pace of innovation. And as I mentioned, we work in a half a dozen European countries, and each of them try, and they have well-meaning, you know, both public officials and elected officials, but they're hamstrung by things like a Vienna Traffic Convention. They're hamstrung by rules and systems, and a very top-down, federal-focused or national-focused system that does not really permit the kind of innovation that we have in a federalist system like in the States. So, you know, we are lucky in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest partners we found, it goes in three segments. The first is in local governments, departments of transportation, like KiwiBot innovated in a way, and not even discussing SADRs or similar, by asking for permission rather than forgiveness. Even advisors told us probably we shouldn't be like, that's the slow path, it's not worth it, but it's worth it. Because creating lasting long-term relationships give you those insights that you won't have or will be very costly to have in other way. So number one, KiwiBot is the strongest advocate for having startups like ours, because we know there are thousands of people working in the same problem. We're gonna see many colors and flavors of different robots on the street in the next few years. So it's important to create those structures, that all of our time in the industry is important to create those channels so that new companies and new entrepreneurs can just come with new ideas and be integrated into the grid that we ultimately sell for the public good. That's one. On the other hand, I think that in another level, groundworks associations, downtown associations are wonderful to work with. Definitely you need to have like very key supply and demand points. I think that we all understood by now, and this is something Neuro understood first, and I gotta say this, that food deserts are key, that we need to create the logistics that will enable people to access atoms, and food is atom. Yeah, my parents are 70 years old and they cannot go out, simple. So we need to give back to the community by advocating for them, and these communities advocate for us in turn. I think that's kind of the relationship. And the third level is definitely on philanthropy, yeah. I think that there are so many people out there that wants to see good in the world. I think that there is a lot that we do that raises attention in these right places. And even if it's like, I don't know, bringing back Detroit, or creating a new system in Canberra, or executing deliveries in Medellin in Colombia, or in Taipei, everywhere, people wants to increase access for communities. And if we increase accessibility, then we're creating a bigger market, and all in all, we're better off. So that's my answer.
So we have some questions coming in from the audience, and they'd like to know, that says my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. What is the top barrier or hurdle for these technologies? Would it be infrastructure, public acceptance, policy?
It's business model. You know, it's and what you've heard are several different types of business models. It's finding product fit, you know, and that's, I think, the biggest obstacle we have. As far as infrastructure, we've not found that to be a problem. You know, the devices are pretty robust and they're able to traverse sidewalks and so on with little difficulty. You know, regulatory burdens, we've been very lucky. Most of the jurisdictions that we've approached have been effusive in working with us. And we believe that reasonable people can reason with each other and find something that works for everyone. But, you know, some of the challenges are just, you know, logistics is a complicated business and people, you know, are accustomed to doing things a certain way. And so pulling them out of that inertia and creating business models that actually can deliver while you're creating the raft, trying to sail, that's the biggest challenge. But the others may have a different point of view.
I agree with David. You know, this is, you know, from a public perception point of view, you know, PAVE, Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, they did a poll recently, and it found that 51% of respondents would trust AVs more at first if they're moving cargo rather than humans. You know, there's such a tremendous opportunity here to help to expose people to the benefits of robotics through goods delivery first. It's much easier to choose to get a pizza delivered to your curb than to put your children in the backseat of a van. And that's just, it's just a fact. But, you know, from a regulatory perspective, you know, the US DOT has been moving forward with developing standards. And, you know, it's a highly technical agency that's focused on safety and through building regulatory frameworks, you know, really at an appropriate pace. And we've been heartened to see the work that's happening there. and also the fact that, US DOT and NHTSA in particular have we've worked with them on receiving a exemption to deploy the R2, which you guys saw in the video earlier, and really to explore what it looks like to deploy different types of vehicles. But this is also a matter of scaling over time, and for Neuro, we're focused on scaling wisely. We're not driving more miles for the sake of racking up miles, but instead trying to learn from our deployments in Houston and in other cities in order to make sure that when we do reach a much larger scale, that we're serving people in a way that that makes sense, that meets their needs, and that ultimately is beneficial to society. And one last point, just on infrastructure. We get this question a lot about whether we need special infrastructure for autonomous vehicles or not, but we're designing our vehicles to operate on the roads as they are today. We don't need these sophisticated sensors and the infrastructure in order to operate because we're focused on operating in the world as it is now. City budgets are already constrained. It's very hard to imagine asking cities to spend more money on V2X sensors, V2I sensors, when instead, our vehicles are sort of the eyes and ears and making those decisions on how to drive.
Yeah. No, for KiwiBot, I think that the current challenge we're solving is autonomy. It's definitely something that we're all looking for, even if it's now or later. KiwiBot's vision has been contrarian. It was actually very hard to stand for this 3 years ago in Silicon Valley, but somehow we made it happen. That you need to build, our position is that you build a service and then you optimize that service, not that you build autonomy for the sake of autonomy. You need to have a use case. You need to understand where you're going to operate. So for us right now, and this is an interesting insight, is that we understood that in the end, the human behind the robot is always going to be there. Governments like that there is a human behind the robot because you can attribute the liabilities. And there is a lot of reasons why the human behind the robot is always going to be there, even if it's 10 robots or 1. So for us, scaling autonomy has been an incredible challenge that led us to one conclusion. The first one is that by optimizing and making autonomous the distance from corner to corner, that's like 80% of the entire time a supervisor is actually making waypoints, which is the current system. And then we can make for more scale in the service. So the challenge right now is that by the first quarter, we will have our first demos of autonomy from corner to corner in a safe manner. But then the next challenge is actually crossing streets. The amount of brain cells that our GPUs need to cross the street is incredibly high. Our supervisors, of course, they will take more time crossing the street because they need to look sideways. They need to make sure that they're not blocking any yellow path. There's a lot of complexity into that. So I would say that the challenge is that now that we're scaling right now, what we need is more gas so that we can keep going quicker because we have the structure and the model, is definitely advancing autonomy as it is sourced to the service, and to build an autonomy that will be as good as a human being is good at being good. That's what we say. You have empathy for another human when you're supervising, but how do you give that to an autonomous system, or how do you make the fit so that it improves your unit economics, which is our ultimate vision. We are sense oriented.
All right, so we live in an age where data and privacy are ongoing concerns for consumers and certainly policymakers. What is your company's approach to data collection and data sharing?
Okay.
I'll be happy to start. So as you have seen, our devices have 9 cameras. We have 2 levels of resolution when they're in autonomous mode. They're in autonomous mode about 98% of the time. And when they're in autonomous mode, there's a higher resolution camera. When a human operator checks in with the device, we use a lower resolution camera. At all times, whether in high or low resolution, human figures are always obfuscated. We never unobfuscate the pictures. We only save very small slices of data that are shipped through a secure system to our server in Talon. We have an audit trail. Only a select number of people in the company are allowed to see those obfuscated photos, and we have an audit trail. Since we operate in Germany, we're subject to German privacy laws and data protection laws, and including European, the general guidelines on data protection, those regulations as well. So we operate pursuant to those standards. We actually have and are excited about reaching out to, for instance, the future of privacy forums and so on, organizations and confederacies on the subject to share our practices to get feedback. We never share data on the device. We never store data on the device. And we are very careful to obey all the laws regarding privacy and data in the jurisdictions that we operate, and we gravitate towards the strictest, which in this case is Germany.
Yeah. For KiwiBot, it's mostly the same. In a few words, I think GDPR is the most compelling safety framework, and we abide by that. It's the standard with most of our business partners, so definitely we do that. But not to crowd time, I would say that it's a mixture of GDPR and MDS development. To me, those are the two keys for data. Informing cities and making sure that customers are protected. Of course, blurring people in the internal GPUs. We don't store any data. Everything is just streamed and then disappears. Streaming costs are actually pretty high these days. So yeah, that's our approach.
Yeah, and as far as Neuro, we of course have an active dialogue with cities, states, and federal government in order to communicate, and comply with data requirements. For example, in California, you have to submit disengagement reports to the California Department of Motor Vehicles every year, as well as collision reports. We happen to be in a collision, and we fully comply with those. But also, there are lots of different means of data sharing and types of ways that it comes around. And one of the ones that we're involved in at the federal level is, the US DOT has the AV Test Initiative, which helps to inform people of where AV tests are happening across the US. And so we've been participating in that. It's a voluntary program where you say, what the nature of your testing is, where it is, what kind of vehicle you're using, and also through our exemption that we received from NHTSA. We're also in regular communication with NHTSA about the data that we have on our vehicles with the R2 and how it's operating, and helping them to learn more about how our vehicle works and helping to inform their future regulatory actions.
Got it. So we're coming up on the end of time here. One question I always like to end these panels with is, what are your hopes for the future of autonomy in transportation? And it could be anything from policy to the technology or the business model. So hear from each of you.
Greg, I started. Do you want to go in reverse order? Do you want to begin?
Sure, thank you. We've touched on a lot of the issues that I would hope to see and the potential that we hope to see for AVs. The best way I've ever heard it put was that it's not about when AVs will show up, but it's where. I'd like to add something on top of that. It's also why. It's what are we using the application of autonomy for? The reason that I got into the AV sector, and I think that a lot of the other people have gotten into autonomy, is because of the social good that we can achieve. So what I'm excited about is we can use robotics to improve people's lives through improving their access to groceries for those 20 million low-income Americans who live in food deserts, helping to improve access to groceries and improve health outcomes. Also helping to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. Look, we're in the middle of a climate catastrophe. My home state's on fire, or was on fire for a good amount earlier this year, California, as David Rodriguez can certainly affirm. This is this is the biggest question of our time. And transportation is the #1 contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. We have to get our act together. We have to reduce our dependence on vehicles. We have to make the transition to electric vehicles and provide other options. So that's really what I'm excited about and what I do hope to see us accomplish through autonomy.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely think Greg has it. For us, is first the logic is that having 3-ton cars polluting with a human brain and an entire human inside of it, delivering a burrito doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's not respectful with the public right away. So that's one. And the second one is that we are entering a new decade with new challenges, increasing challenges to accessibility. I think that definitely hunger is the #1 issue that increased democratic food service programs, that's a long word, can support. And I will say it again, I think that Silicon Valley's next big thing is not a $1,000 phone, but a $5 meal that includes delivery. I think that there is no competition really in terms of how far that can go. I believe that it's a societal issue, and we're just lucky that we believed in this 3 to 5 or more years ago when this was just something that sounds crazy. Now it's our time to actually be quicker. It's a great time for VCs and the sector to notice that this is in growth stage and definitely take action. I think that it's an exciting moment. That's how I see it.
Well, I'll just say that I think that speaking for myself and my family, there's kind of a desert of hope at the moment. And what I love about innovation and this technology and the applications and the promise is that it is a very hopeful message that, we can use our brains and we can come together and we can solve challenges. That whether it be a climate change challenge or a food desert challenge, I think there's a hope associated with this. And sometimes we look at technology as somewhat exclusive and we don't make the connection with what it means for us as a society and as a people. Look, if we in our company, if we can help someone who is disabled or not, obtain their groceries for less than it costs to ride the bus to the grocery store and give them more time to help their children with their homework or be a better caregiver, that's a win. If we can take the drudgery out of approaching climate change by giving people green receipts to let them know how much CO2 they've actually saved by virtue of taking this service versus their car, we take the drudgery out of what is a necessary fact, which is we have to attack climate change and we have to do it or we will not be here much longer. It's the other applications, whether we use our devices for helping people stay out of hospitals. People recently released, whether it's delivery of medication, whether it's release of delivery of durable medical equipment or testing, whatever the case may be, I just think the takeaway here is the promise. And so our focus, I'll speak for myself, is mostly on the regulatory side, which I love. And I think many of us grew up watching Star Wars. It never occurred to me as a 7-year-old watching Star Wars, who gave the permit for the battleship? How did this happen? Who was driving the regulatory bus that made all of these things happen? Well, we're creating behind the scenes the regulations that will let people dream in the future and that will solve our problems. And anyway, it's just a real career blessing to be a part of this industry. I want to wish our colleagues at Neuro and Kiwi the very best. We're all going to succeed. It doesn't mean if you're the biggest or the first. The companies that will succeed are the best. And I think you've got great representatives on this panel in Kiwi and Neuro, and I look forward to their success in the future.
Amen. Thanks, David. Appreciate the Star Wars reference as well.
Sorry, I'm a geek. I mean, who proved these things?
Is there an after hours we can talk about Star Wars?
Yeah.
Or...
Kevin.
Thank you all for.
Thank you all.
I just want to say thank you all for participating today. This is so exciting for me. I just want to say yes, yes, and yes, David, and Greg, for the spirit at which your companies are addressing autonomy and delivery robots. We can get people jobs and improve their health care and give them access to good food. At the same time, spurring on innovation, creating sustainability. All of these things are not just possible, they're at our fingertips, but we have to bring the general public into it. I think one of the panelists said before, we can't build it and then say, hey guys, come on, look what I built. We can bring them along for the journey and say, this is what we're creating. This is what we're working on. How is it going to work best in your communities? That's what public policy and public affairs is about. Bringing the public in as we create, as we innovate. So thank you for what you're doing. And we look forward to all the great things that you'll be doing in the future. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, everybody. We'll be back at 3:30 for our panel with Waymo's head of public policy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.